This happened to me in Tempe, Arizona, not far from Mill Avenue, where all the bars are at. I was out bar hopping with a group of friends one weekend, having a good time, and had gotten pretty wasted. I have this terrible habit of wandering off and getting lost when I drink. And this particular night, I had managed to get myself into a very dumb situation. After wandering down streets for almost an hour, I started to realize I was very lost. And to make things worse, my phone was out of battery. At some point, I decided I would just walk back to my friend's house, which I knew was somewhere north of area we were bar hopping. I should mention I am severely incompetent when it comes to directions and navigating in a city, so I didn't realize I was a solid 7 to 8 miles away from my friend's place. As I was stumbling confidently along the empty roads at 2 a.m., a sedan suddenly pulls off the road in front of me aggressively, almost blocking my path. Somewhat startled, I look towards the driver's side and see a rather large and mean-looking black man staring me down. In situations like this, most people have one of two reactions. They either become scared and defensive, or angry and aggressive. I, on the other hand, am an insane person and was just drunk enough to have no sense of the danger I was in. I should mention, I am your typical privileged suburban white boy, not particularly threatening or big. I proceeded to wave at the guy saying, "Hey man, what's good?" I'm not completely sure, but I think I was probably smiling too. I specifically remember the face he made. It was a sort of confused and conflicted look, as if I were asking him what year it was. He paused for a second and asked me something, but I couldn't understand what he said. I said something like, "Huh?" He then asked me, "Where you going?" I told him I was trying to walk to my friend's place, but I have no idea where I am. After another pause, he told me to get in. Without thinking, I walked over to the passenger side and hopped in. Pretty dumb, right? Well, at the time, it seemed like a good idea. Once I got in, I was able to get a better look at the guy. He was covered in tats and was wearing your typical thug attire. I also noticed his arm was all bandaged. Oh, and he had a pistol tucked into his shorts. And again, for some reason, none of this fazed me at the time. He asked me where my friend's place was, and I gave him directions. I'm pretty sociable and talkative when I drink, so I immediately started chatting with the guy casually. I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but eventually he started telling me that he had just gotten out of the hospital after being treated for a gunshot wound on his arm, and his girl just broke up with him because of it. Apparently, she didn't like that he was in a gang and getting into gunfights. Go figure. He then told me that he was real pissed off about her and about getting shot, and he was driving around looking for someone to rob when he found me, and that he has served time for robbery in the past. At that point, my drunken brain started to connect the dots, and I thought about the roughly $200 I had in my wallet at that very moment. But instead of freaking out, I just said something like, "Damn man, that's rough." He also told me that he really wanted to be a rapper and was trying to get his music career started. I tried to be supportive, telling him to go for it. About 10-15 minutes later, we pulled up at my friend's place. Now this is when I should have gotten out of the car and told the armed man thanks for the ride. But again, I'm an insane person and felt like I owed him one for taking me all the way there. So I asked if he wanted to come in and smoke weed. He said he was down. At this point, my friends had already been back for a while and were all wondering what happened to me. As you might expect, they were awfully surprised when I showed up with a strange black dude who I now knew was a gang member who had debated robbing me at gunpoint. What the dude did next sort of sketched everyone out though. My buddy lives in a house with a few other people. His room is at the end of a hallway, and that's where they all were listening to music. He also has a huge safe in his closet that is visible as soon as you walk in the room. I didn't realize it, but my new friend had brought his gun inside with him, and shortly after entering the room, after everyone said, "What's up?" he took his gun out of his waistband and put it down right on top of the safe in front of everyone. It seemed like a really odd thing to do, but it was a lot better than what he could have done. I feel like it was a sort of show of respect, like he wanted to show that he wasn't going to use it. Luckily, I have super chill friends, so they acted cool and were about to roll up a blunt. So, a few minutes later, we all went out back to smoke, leaving the gun in his room. The dude chilled with us for a while longer and actually seemed to get along with some of my friends who had a similar interest in music. He then picked up his gun off the safe and left without incident. Looking back, I realized that could have gone much, much worse, especially since my buddy had a lot of cash in that safe, and he could have easily robbed us at gunpoint at any time. I like to think that although he was a criminal and a gang member, he was also just a guy going through a hard time, and a little kindness and marijuana prevented that night from going very bad. Am I crazy? My fiance and I threw a dinner party one time to celebrate his mom completing chemo. I hired a caterer. We were expecting 25 friends and family, so it was more than the kitchenette of our single-story ranch house could handle. We'd also only just moved in, so didn't have a lot of cooking staples. The caterer said he'd bring everything 75% done, but he needed to finish off some dishes in our kitchen. I told him that was fine, as long as he was finished by 5, because the kitchen is centrally located, and we'd prefer everyone be finished before the guests arrived due to the intimate nature of the occasion. He said that would be fine. He arrives as scheduled at 12 p.m. We gave him until 5, and the guests aren't even arriving until 6, so it's plenty of time. He smelled like actual dog shit, but his accent sounded European, so I thought maybe he just didn't believe in deodorant. It was more than a sweat smell though. It smelled like a sun-baked diaper, and that made me uneasy because he was going to be preparing food for sick prior and young kids. I just made sure he washed his hands and then left him to his own devices, worrying I was being presumptuous. Throughout the entire process, he keeps pulling me aside to ask me questions and have me taste things. I was super busy because my husband had to work during the day and pick up the surprise guest right after. So setting up the deck, decorating, putting together the slideshow equipment, coordinating the surprise guest. We flew in her sister, and I had to make sure she got an Uber at the airport, and her hotel had worked out, etc. and just a million other little details. So, every 10 minutes, being asked things like, do you prefer this with paprika or without? Which is fine. Whatever you think. Taste it to be sure. Was getting old. When he was still there at 5:45, after 2 gentle reminders, I flat out told him I needed him completely out by 6, no matter what. He apologized and said there had been a delay because our oven wouldn't stay up to temperature. I'd never had a problem with our oven, but I figured he's the professional. Maybe it was a subtle problem. A little before 6 rolls around. A few of our friends start trickling in. I decide to tell him, whatever's done is done, and whatever isn't, he should just put in the fridge. But he's nowhere to be found. I go out on the deck to ask my friends if they'd seen him. And he's out there, alcoholic beverage in hand, out of his chef whites, and now in a tee and jeans, mingling with my friends. I walked out just in time for him to introduce himself to my cousin-in-law as a good friend of mine. Nope, too weird for me. I met him in person for the first time barely 6 hours ago. I told him he needed to leave, now. So he goes inside and gets his bag and makes a beeline for my bedroom. I'm taken aback. I say, excuse me, where are you going? And he says, to change. So, first of all, we have a guest bathroom, clearly visible. Second, why can't he wear a t-shirt and jeans home? I tell him I'm not comfortable with him going in my room, but he insists it'll only be a second and goes in and shuts and locks the door. I couldn't even get a word out before he went in and felt helpless. I was going outside to ask one of my friends to help me usher him out, but at that point my fiancé got there with my aunt-in-law. I had to explain the situation to him, nearly in tears at that point, and he went in the bedroom. Why? So he pounded on the door, and the caterer came out, still in a t-shirt and jeans. And my fiancé said, you shouldn't be in there. You need to leave. And the caterer said, excuse me, but this is not your house. It is not up to you to decide. And my 6'4", 260-pound fiancé tells him, yes, actually, it is his house, and puts a hand on his back and guides him to the door. The caterer says, I thought only she lived here. And he says, yes, my fiancé lives here with me. And the caterer goes nuts. He turns to me and screams, you lied to me, you bitch. I have no clue what he's talking about. He starts yelling about how I lead him on and calling me a bitch some more. I don't know who he thought the man in the pictures with me around the house was. So my fiancé says, oh no, you won't talk that way in my house. Find the door. And the caterer goes in the kitchen and starts throwing the trays of food out of the refrigerator and on the floor. At that point, my fiancé realized 2 of his brothers, both currently offensive linemen at the college level, had come in and were on the deck. He signaled to them and they came inside, and he basically said, this guy is harassing us. Since they're a family of all boys and my fiancé is the first to get married, they don't get to flex their protective muscles too often, and jumped at the chance to toss this guy out. The party then went on as planned, but I insisted we just order pizza and throw out all the food he made. My fiancé and friends kept saying, isn't that a bit much? But I was insistent. We went out late, drinking with his brothers, and got home around 3:30 a.m. and passed out in our room. At around 5 a.m., I was woken up to sound of the door opening. I figure either we forgot to lock the door in our drunken stupor, and it blew open, or one of his family forgot their keys, or something in the house and didn't want to wake us. His parents and his local brother have a key, but his parents never ever let themselves in when they know we're home, and his brother had even more than we did and was definitely not awake and driving around at 5 a.m. It wasn't nearly windy enough for the door to have blown open. It had been tranquil all night. So, I wake up my fiance and whisper, "Someone just came in the house." And he said the same thing. Probably my brother left his wallet or something. I figure I'm being paranoid and try to put it rest when I hear a loud crash sound. With that, my fiance was up and on his feet in one movement. He told me to lock myself in the closet and call 911 while he went and looked around. As I was pulling out my phone, we hear in that distinct accent, "I know you're there. Hello?" And I realize it's just this insane caterer. I'm not worried about this caterer physically overpowering my fiance, or me for that matter, so I charge right out there. The caterer is shirtless and clearly on something. He's taking the pictures that are of just me off the wall and holding several in his arms already. He lunges towards me when he sees me. My fiance gets between me and him, and I call 911. Fiance tells him cops have been called, and it is in his best interest to get off the property. Caterer says, "No, I have to make sure she is okay." And I say, "What? Why wouldn't I be okay?" And my fiance rightfully says not to engage with him and feed into it. My fiance stays between me and him while I climb out a window. He watches as the caterer throws photos of us on the floor. Fiance didn't want to subdue or touch him in any way, so caterer couldn't make any assault claims. He's begun to destroy our kitchen at this point, and when the cops come in, he has a butcher knife. My fiance considered going for the gun safe when he first got the knife, since we live in a stand-your-ground state, but he decided the situation was hectic enough without introducing a firearm. Caterer doesn't obey police orders to drop his weapon, and he says he isn't leaving without me, so they tase him. It's lucky for him, he only got tased, and he didn't antagonize my husband into squashing him. As he's led out in cuffs, he's shouting how he and I are in love, and it figures I chose a macho thug over a sweet, sensitive artist like him, and all women are whores, etc. He continues on this tirade the entire time police are reading him his rights. The police ask us to do an inventory of the house and see if anything's missing or damaged besides what we witnessed him do. We go around, and there's nothing. But then I remember he was in our room yesterday and go through the room. All my panties from the dirty laundry hamper were gone, and my vibrator had been moved from where I keep it. We were so freaked out in the aftermath that we replaced all our kitchenware, toothbrushes, sent our sheets to be professionally cleaned, and had a cleaning crew do a deep clean on the whole house. So glad we decided not to serve the food to our guests and my fiance's medically fragile mother. He sent me a letter from prison that thankfully my husband intercepted because I was still recovering from the whole thing. We gave it to police, who helped us get issued a no-contact order. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison 5 years ago, so he's out by now. Creepy caterer guy. Let's not meet again. Always change your locks when you buy a new house. So, this happened in 2013, and I was 17. My family was looking at this house, and the owner showed up and talked with my parents. Seemed like a nice older man. Built the house himself. It's a pretty nice 2-story house, overlooking a river. Anyway, I was standing back watching everyone talk, and as the owner is talking and laughing, there's a break in the conversation where he turns away from my parents, and his expression completely and instantly changes from happy to the most sinister and hateful scowl I've ever seen. I don't think he noticed me watching. It probably appeared to be on my phone as my head was down. As soon as he turned back, he instantly went back to smiling. It was so creepy, and honestly, made me feel sick. I told my mom, who said it was weird, but maybe he's just awkward. So, we got the house, we moved in, and the next weekend, my family is going to church. But I don't feel like going, and they all leave me at home. So, it's Sunday morning, about 11 a.m., when I hear really loud banging outside. It's rhythmic and coming from the side of the house. I was on the other side of the house, on the second floor. Honestly, my dumb ass thought it was maybe the wind. It was stormy that day, and I didn't think much of it. It stopped after about 5 minutes. Minutes later, I hear walking around downstairs, chairs moving, kitchen cabinets opening, and the fridge opening. I immediately quietly go lock my door, grab my baseball bat, and call 911. While I tell them my address, I text my mom and tell her that someone is in the house and that I've called 911. At that point, the 911 operator said that someone was 10 minutes out. I tell her I heard steps walking towards the stairs. Basically, the house is so thin, I could track where he was in the house. At this time, my mom responded that she's on her way. She's 30 minutes away. So here is a 17-year-old, 5'2", 100-pound girl hunkered in her room, full well knowing that if he came in, he'd overpower me and take the bat. I was terrified. I heard him walk down the hallway towards my door. I saw the handle turn and stop. It was locked, and I heard him stand there. He didn't move. I could hear his breathing. It felt like forever, but really, I think it was about 10 seconds. I heard him turn and go back down. I heard the back door open and shut, and about 3 minutes later, the police pulled up. The 911 operator asked me if I could let them in, or if they needed to force it. I knew he had left, so I let them in. No one was there. No sign of forced entry. Nothing. When my mom got there, she looked at my stepdad and asked if he had changed the locks. He hadn't. I think the creepiest part, and what really validated my story, was that my mom had just vacuumed the hallway, and there were shoe prints that were larger than anyone in our house, and the police hadn't been up there, and they stopped just outside my room. He died about a year after that. Please, don't forget to change your locks.